Disturbing true suburban horror story. The Johnson family moved into 847 Maple Drive in the quiet suburb of Meadowbrook in early September, drawn by the excellent school district and the tree-lined streets where children rode bikes and neighbors waved from perfectly manicured lawns. The house was a charming two-story colonial with white siding and black shutters, exactly what Sarah and Mark Johnson had been searching for to raise their two daughters, Emma, age 10, and Lily, age 7. "It's perfect," Sarah had said during the walkthrough, already imagining family dinners in the spacious kitchen and summer barbecues in the fenced backyard. The realtor had smiled, perhaps a bit too eagerly. "You're getting a great deal." The previous owners were very motivated to sell. Sarah should have asked why. The first week was wonderful. Boxes were unpacked, furniture arranged, and the girls settled into their new school with surprising ease. The neighbors seemed friendly. The Hendersons next door brought over a casserole. The Petersons across the street offered to help with yard work. But on their 8th night in the house, Sarah heard the knocking. It started at 2:17 a.m. She checked the clock, squinting in the darkness. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate, coming from somewhere inside the walls. Sarah lay still, listening, wondering if she'd imagined it. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. The same rhythm, the same volume, definitely real. "Mark," she whispered, shaking her husband awake. "Do you hear that?" Mark mumbled something incoherent and rolled over. The knocking stopped. Sarah convinced herself it was just old house settling sounds and eventually fell back asleep. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same 3 knocks, but this time they seemed to be moving, starting in the wall behind their bed, then progressing around the room. Sarah got up and pressed her ear to the wall, trying to locate the source. The knocking stopped the moment she touched the wall. On the 3rd night, the knocking woke both Sarah and Mark. And this time, it wasn't just knocking. There were footsteps in the hallway outside their bedroom. Slow, deliberate footsteps. But when Mark opened the door and turned on the light, the hallway was empty. One of the girls must have gotten up, Mark said, but when they checked both daughters' rooms, Emma and Lily were sound asleep. By the end of the first month, the phenomena had escalated. Objects would move on their own. Sarah would set her keys on the kitchen counter and find them in the bathroom. Mark's wallet disappeared from his nightstand and reappeared 3 days later in the refrigerator. The TV would turn on by itself, always to static, always at 2:17 a.m. The girls started having nightmares. Emma woke up screaming about the man who watched you from the closet. Lily refused to sleep alone, claiming there was a lady in the mirror who doesn't match what I do. Sarah tried to dismiss it as imagination, stress from the move, adjustment to a new home. But she couldn't dismiss what she saw one afternoon while doing laundry. She was in the basement, transferring clothes from washer to dryer, when she noticed something odd about the wall behind the furnace. The concrete had a different texture in one section, rougher and newer looking than the surrounding walls. She moved closer and saw that behind some old shelving units was a patch of concrete about 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide that had clearly been added after the rest of the basement was built. Something about it made Sarah's skin crawl. She reached out to touch it, and the moment her fingers made contact with the concrete, she felt cold. Not the normal coolness of basement concrete, but a bone-deep cold that shot up her arm and made her gasp. And she heard it, a whisper, so faint she almost thought she'd imagined it. "Help me." Sarah yanked her hand back and ran upstairs, her heart pounding. She didn't tell Mark. He was already frustrated with her paranoia about the house, dismissing the strange occurrences as coincidence or suggesting she was stressed. That night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., Sarah woke to find Emma standing beside her bed. But something was wrong with Emma's face. Her expression was blank, her eyes open but unfocused, and when she spoke, her voice was flat and emotionless. "The lady in the wall wants to come out. She's been there for so long. She's so cold." Sarah sat up, terrified. "Emma, honey, You're sleepwalking. Let's get you back to bed. She says her name is Margaret. She says a man put her there. She says there are others. Sarah's blood ran cold. Others? But Emma blinked, her expression suddenly normal again, confusion crossing her face. Mommy, why am I in your room? The next morning, while Mark was at work and the girls were at school, Sarah did something she'd been avoiding. She researched the house's history. What she found made her want to vomit. 847. Maple Drive had been built in 1987 by a man named David Crane. He'd lived there alone until 1995, when he disappeared without a trace. The house had sat empty for 2 years before being sold. Since then, it had changed hands 6 times in 25 years, an unusual number of turnovers for suburban family home. Sarah dug deeper, searching old newspaper archives. In 1993, a woman named Margaret Sullivan had disappeared from Meadow Brick. She'd been last seen getting into a car with a man matching David Crane's description, but there had never been enough evidence to charge him. In 1994, another woman, Jennifer Hayes, had vanished. Then in early 1995, a third, Patricia Moore. All 3 women had disappeared within a 2-year period. All 3 had connections to David Crane. And then Crane himself had vanished. Sarah's hand shook as she read. Could those women be what Emma's sleepwalking self had referred to? Could they be buried in the house? She called the police non-emergency line and explained what she'd found. The detective she spoke to was skeptical, but agreed to send someone to take a statement. When Officer Rodriguez arrived that afternoon, Sarah showed her the newspaper articles and explained about the strange patch of concrete in the basement. Mrs. Johnson, I understand you're concerned, but we can't just excavate someone's basement based on unusual experiences and old newspaper clippings. The Crane case is closed. He probably just left town. But the women who disappeared were investigated thoroughly at the time. There was never any evidence connecting them to this house. After Officer Rodriguez left, Sarah felt helpless. She knew something was wrong with this house, knew in her bones that those women were there, trapped, calling out for help. But she also knew she sounded like a conspiracy theorist, and no one would believe her without concrete evidence. That night, Sarah made a decision. If the police wouldn't investigate, she would. After Mark and the girls were asleep, Sarah went down to the basement with a sledgehammer she'd bought that afternoon. She moved the shelving units away from the wall and stared at that patch of newer concrete. If you're there, she whispered, I'm going to help you. I'm going to set you free. She swung the sledgehammer at the wall. The first blow made a small crack. The second widened it. On the third blow, the cold hit her like a wave, that same bone-deep cold she felt before, but stronger, overwhelming. The crack in the wall exhaled. There was no other word for it. Air came rushing out, stale and wrong-smelling, and with it came a sound that would haunt Sarah for the rest of her life, a sigh of relief multiplied by 3, as if 3 people had been holding their breath for decades and could finally breathe. Sarah's sledgehammer fell from her hands as the crack widened on its own, the concrete crumbling away to reveal darkness beyond. And in that darkness, Sarah saw bones. She called 911, screaming, unable to form coherent sentences. When the police arrived, they found Sarah sitting on the basement steps, shaking and crying. They found what were behind the wall, the remains of 3 women entombed in a hidden space behind the concrete, preserved by the cool, dry conditions. The investigation that followed confirmed what Sarah had suspected. Margaret Sullivan, Jennifer Hayes, and Patricia Moore had all been murdered by David Crane and buried in the walls of his house. Crane had disappeared before police could arrest him. He'd fled to Mexico, where he died in a car accident in 1997, never facing justice for his crimes. The Johnson family moved out of 847, Maple Drive the next day, staying with Sarah's parents while they figured out what to do. They eventually sold the house at a significant loss to a developer who tore it down and built a small park in its place, Memorial Gardens, dedicated to the 3 women whose remains have been found there. But the story didn't end with the house's demolition. Sarah continued to experience a phenomena for months afterward. The knocking at 2:17 a.m., objects moving on their own, whispers in empty rooms. A psychic she consulted told her that the women's spirit had attached themselves to her because she'd been the one to free them, the one who'd listen when others wouldn't. They are grateful, the psychic said, but they are also bound to you now. They see you as their voice, their advocate. They won't leave until they feel their story has been fully told. So Sarah did tell their story. She contacted the families of Margaret, Jennifer, and Patricia, helped them find closure. She pushed for a memorial to be erected not just at the park but at City Hall, listing the names of the 3 women and warning about the dangers of missing persons cases being closed too quickly. And gradually, the phenomena stopped. The last occurrence was 6 months after the house's demolition. Sarah woke at 2:17 a.m. to find 3 women standing at the foot of her bed. Not threatening, not frightening, just there. They were translucent, barely visible, but Sarah recognized them from photos she'd seen. Margaret, Jennifer, and Patricia. They smiled at her. No words were spoken, but Sarah understood. Thank you. We can rest now. Then they faded away, and Sarah never experienced another paranormal event again. The story of 847, Maple Drive, became a local legend, a cautionary tale about the darkness that can hide behind suburban normalcy. The Memorial Gardens Park became a place where people brought flowers for the 3 victims, a reminder that evil can exist anywhere, even on quiet streets with manicured lawns and friendly neighbors. Sarah still lives in Meadowbrick, though in a different neighborhood. She became an advocate for missing persons cases, working with families and pushing for better investigative procedures. Emma and Lily grew up knowing the story of what happened in their first house, understanding that sometimes the scariest things aren't ghosts. They are the very real monsters who hide behind normal appearances. And sometimes, late at night, Sarah thinks about that moment in the basement when the wall crumbled away and those 3 sighs of relief emerged from decades of darkness. She thinks about how many other houses might hold similar secrets, how many other voices might be crying out from within walls, unheard. The suburbs aren't always safe. Perfect lawns and white picket fences can hide the most disturbing truths. And sometimes, the real horror isn't in ghost stories. It's in the very real evil that some people are capable of, and the innocent victims who pay the price. 847, Maple Drive is gone now, replaced by a peaceful park. But Sarah will never forget what was hidden there, and she'll never stop listening for voices that others ignore. Because someone needs to listen. Someone needs to hear.